Welcome to Pioneers in Payments, where payments experts share their insights. Now, here's our host, Donna Blum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Pioneers in Payments. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Aaron McPherson from AFM Consulting. Welcome, Aaron.
Hi, good to be here.
I'm so glad you could join us today. Looking forward to getting some insights from you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
To get us started, Aaron, would you mind sharing a little bit with our audience about your background in the payments industry and what you do from your consulting practice?
Well, yeah, as you said, I'm an independent consultant, have been for about 5 years. But I got my start in the payments industry actually as an industry researcher back at IDC Financial Insights, and about 25 years ago. And there, I started up the global payments research practice and grew that to be the second largest practice at the company, and then parlayed that into a role at FIS, where I was Senior Vice President for Global Payment Strategy and helped them with their acquisition of Clear to Pay and SunGard in terms of making the business case for it. And then after that, I went back into research as the Vice President for Research Operations at Mercator Advisory Group, where I ran the research team there. And they were since bought by Javelin Strategy and Payments. So I keep in touch with them, but I've been independent for about 5 years, and feel this is the best way I can contribute to the industry.
That's fantastic. Well, you certainly have a wealth of experience in the industry.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot, been changed a lot.
It sure has and continues to change, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's kind of what we're here to talk about today is all of the changes and disruption that's happening in the industry. My first question for you is, what would you say is the most notable trend in the payments industry today?
Well, I guess you're going to hear this a lot. I think it's AI, or artificial intelligence. And but my take on it is a little different, because I think that when people look at what AI is doing today in terms of chatbots and fraud prevention, uh, they're not thinking about what a dramatic transformation it could have on not just the payments industry, but on all industries. And one of the things I've been doing is experimenting with some of the AI assisted coding tools that are available. And these things are amazing. I mean, someone like me who has no programming background can now code up a website, use APIs. I mean, it's the reports I've seen are that this could replace 90% of what programmers do every day. And what this says to me that's exciting is that we're entering an age where we're not going to be constrained as much by IT overhead as we were in the past. I think one of the biggest issues in payments today is the sheer amount of technical debt, all the legacy systems, messaging formats, and everything that makes it so hard to move forward. And with this new technology, I think it's going to be a lot quicker and cheaper to be able to make those kinds of changes. So I think we're on the verge of a real sea change in terms of how companies can approach the market.
That's fantastic. Yes, in the past, modernizing and writing code for payments platforms has been very time consuming and therefore expensive. So this is definitely a game changer for the industry.
Yeah, I think it also democratizes it, because what you're opening the door to is line of business people being able to quickly prototype applications that they want to build and show those to the IT group. I think you're still going to need professional programmers to get the kind of reliability and scalability that you need for an enterprise situation. But they're going to be focused much more on the high level architectural decisions and the strategic decisions. So it means that you don't have to spend as much time on the tedious manual processes, and can have much tighter integration between the business and IT. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of innovation, particularly at banks, which have been somewhat challenged to keep up with the fintechs now. But I think now have an opportunity to move as quickly and as nimbly as a fintech. It's kind of like when we had open APIs and software as a service. It's that kind of sea change in terms of the ease of integrating new technology, of developing new technology, and bringing it to market.
What would you say is the top opportunity for organizations that process payments?
Well, I think the top opportunity, and one thing that I've been focused on a lot lately, is cross-border payments. Because if you look across the payments landscape here in the United States, we've got it pretty good. You know, we've got very, very efficient card networks, ACH networks, faster payment rails. You know, it's really difficult to improve on that very much. But in the cross-border situation, you've got a variety of different actors all competing in that space. So there's a lot of different pricing and different availability. You've got a correspondent banking system that's somewhat antiquated and that is not very transparent. And so a lot of the interesting work that I see being done is in cross-border payments, and particularly with stable coins, which work in any country natively and can be used for cross-border payments instantaneously. And there's big banks like JP Morgan Chase and Connexus that are doing this sort of thing today. You know, they just announced a big cross-border payment thing. Huge industry associations like SWIFT, the Bank of International Settlements are all doing pilots on this technology. And so I think it's much more interesting to look at it cross-border than it is to look at it domestically. Domestically, I think they have a hard time competing with what we already have. But when you're getting to cross-border, and especially to countries that are maybe less well served by existing systems, that's where it has the ability to kind of fill in the gaps. And what I see the trajectory going is that it's going to initially be some of these smaller countries that are using it, and then it'll gradually move up the way a lot of new technology does, is to scale up and start to compete first with the dedicated cross-border payments companies like Wise, and then ultimately for the large value payments that the banks are doing. And I think banks have a real ability to play in this area because they can tokenize their deposits into stablecoin form and operate much more easily. So, and it's also more standards based. So I think this is a great opportunity for banks, and a lot of banks that don't do cross-border payments on their own are going to be able to do it because they have this new tool.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and cross-border payments obviously are super important, and we talk about them at all the industry conferences that we go to. And so it is amazing that we do have this option for instant cross-border payments, or at least faster cross-border payments.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm on the Faster Payments Council, and we're working right now on a white paper about cross-border payments using stablecoins. So it's definitely something that we're taking very seriously.
That's great. And by the way, I'll put in a plug for the Faster Payments Council. I'm also a member of the council, and they do great work. Definitely an amazing group of thought leaders who are working to advance the industry and to increase adoption of instant and faster payments globally. Well, their main focus is the United States, but it certainly impacts the rest of the world too. Well, so we talked about the greatest opportunity. Aaron, what would you say is the greatest challenge for organizations that process payments today?
I think the greatest challenge, and it kind of loops into what I said before, the greatest challenge is the technical debt, the amount of legacy systems and legacy messaging networks that encumber the payment systems today and payment processors. Just that everything takes a lot longer and is a lot more difficult than it should be. And they're promising new technologies like pay by bank, where they typically take a long time to roll out because there's all these different integrations that have to take place, and it's just a lot more difficult. So I think that's really where we need to be focusing our attention, is making that more flexible and more agile. And I think that's where AI can play a role, as well as some of the other technologies that are being developed now. You know, particularly I think with the open banking rule from the CFPB, that's a challenge, assuming it goes ahead as planned. Although I think even if it doesn't, open banking is still where we're headed as an industry. But that's going to require a level of integration and trust and security that we haven't seen before. And so I think that's another challenge, and another one that technology is going to help us manage, certainly in terms of the fraud management, we're seeing, we saw with Zelle a new type of fraud, which is social engineered fraud. That's a big challenge. Fraud itself is growing monumentally every year. And so I think that's another big challenge as we have more different types of payments, whether it's stable coins or faster payments or same day ACH. You have a lot less time to detect fraud and to respond to it. So I think that that is where we're going to have to use AI and other technologies to really identify and stop this sort of fraud before it gets going.
Hmm. Well, and it's interesting you mentioned AI as something that is definitely helping to advance the industry, but it's also helping those fraudsters, right? So, got to kind of fight fire with fire.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous challenge too, is the ability to do deep fakes to impersonate people. We're going to have to rely a lot more on device-based authentication uh, rather than seeing people's faces or relying on people's voices. Although I did see a fascinating technology at last year's Finovate that's able to detect a synthesized voice that's indistinguishable to a human, but to the AI, one AI can recognize another by detecting minute anomalies in the way the voice is synthesized. And there's also a lot of work being done by OpenAI and Microsoft, Google, and others in terms of AI safety and being able to fingerprint AI so that it's identifiable as such. But of course, the bad guys are not going to use that. They're going to be running their own large language models on their own hardware, and they're going to be using them in ways that we can't really control.
Right, right. I think also a lot of the bad actors using AI are not going to be trying to fool the banks. They're going to be trying to fool the consumers, right? So there's a great deal of education that needs to happen there too to ensure that users, customers of the bank, don't get you know buffaloed into sending money to somebody they should not.
Yeah, when I get spam emails or phishing emails, most of them are still so obvious in terms of bad spelling and I'm like, why are you guys not using ChatGPT for this? You could
Right.
that they're going to catch on.
Yeah, they are catching on. I think they are definitely getting more sophisticated with their approach. But it's good that we have AI as a tool to combat fraud. Okay, so that's the biggest challenge. Um, what would you say if you had to summarize everything that you know about the industry and where you believe it's going? What would be your silver bullet piece of advice to payments organizations?
My silver bullet piece of advice would be to be a lot more creative in terms of thinking about what businesses you can get into. And this is something I said a long time ago. If you look at a company like Google, Google doesn't just restrict itself to search. They're involved in travel planning, they're involved in email, workplace, all kinds of things. And yet banks and credit unions, for some reason, partly regulatory, but partly tradition, really just stay in their lane and do the same products basically that they've done, for centuries. And I think that thinking needs to change, that we need to wake up to the possibilities that we're really at the hub of commerce. We see all of the transactions that are going on and can do a lot more in terms of helping people with their shopping, managing their financial lives. I see a lot of work being done in this area already. But I would say, in terms of a silver bullet, and in line with the new opportunities for AI, get out there, experiment, prototype. You may be surprised what you can build relatively quickly and cheaply that could really make a splash, and that could you can unleash the creativity of the people in your organization with these tools, and really crowdsource it and have your people come up with things that they think customers would value, or even have your customers come up with things like with hackathons and things like that. I think there's a lot of tools that the tech industry uses that banks and credit unions could use too, to really reform their businesses and get into new areas.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, uh, it's easy to kind of get sort of stagnant, and to continue to do things the way you've always done them. But I think really what the industry is demanding now is new and innovative value added services and innovative ways of making payments. Customers really they want to pay, right? And a lot of times they're looking for the thing that's going to be not only the least expensive and most efficient, but maybe even the most fun. You can
Right.
Payments
And
can be fun.
yeah, exactly. And one of the things I think is interesting about payments is it's really a horizontal technology. Payments are integral to every industry you can think of. And so that means that financial institutions can play in every industry you can think of if they can come up with solutions for all the different vertical markets. So there's just a tremendous amount of growth there if we can just get out of our own way.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost the sky's the limit, right? I mean, if you can think it, there might be a way to actually do it. So start using some of that creativity. I like that. Okay. Well, we talked a little bit before the interview about, just some things that are happening in the industry, and something that's new that I was hoping maybe you could speak to was the announcement that the federal government made, that they will no longer issue or receive checks. Would you like to share a little bit about that and what you think it's going to do to the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way it was announced through executive order is not the way I would want to do it. You would hope that there would be more of a process and more of a plan for how are you going to move people over. And because at this point, I think something like 90% of federal payments are done electronically anyway. So you're really looking at this very small piece of people, and many of them are still on check because they don't have the ability to receive electronic payments. They may be using check cashing outlets or things like that. And there is an exemption in the executive order for hardship cases. But I think that this is an important step forward because if the federal government is now pushing people to do direct deposit or to take a benefit card, then it opens the way for companies and other businesses to do the same. So I think the federal government can have a huge influence in terms of moving the last remaining consumer payments off of check and onto electronics. And then you just have to work on the business to business payments, which are still, I think, the biggest part of it.
Still primarily checks, yeah. Well, very good. Thank you for sharing that. Erin, before I let you go, I want to make sure that our audience knows how they can get in touch with you, or if they want to learn more about your consulting services, how could they reach out or learn more information?
Sure. Well, they can go to my website, afmfintech.com, and my email address is just Aaron, Aaron at afmfintech.com. And there's all kinds of information on what I do and how to contact me.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Erin, for your time today and for your words of wisdom. And I want to thank everybody for watching. Bye now.